All right, so welcome back to the Thrive Vodcast. And this is not another live from the hunt episode, but it's going to be kind of a live after the hunt episode. So I just wrapped up my first hunt of the season. We spent 9 days deep in the wilderness. We killed 3 bulls in 9 days. I was fortunate enough to finish up a little early, got home last night, got to see my son play a fantastic football game. So I was so blessed to be able to get back to see my son play football. It was a great hunt. It was a great game last night. So now we've got the aftermath to deal with. So I've got all this meat. The way I brought it back this time was I stopped and bought 20 pounds of dry ice, and I put 10 pounds in each cooler. That got me 3 or 4 days of pretty cool meat. I wrapped it in a brown paper bag so they wouldn't freeze or burn the meat or get next to the meat. I think the meat's going to be fantastic. But like I said, I wanted to be this live after the hunt. So we're going to find out. I haven't touched the meat. I haven't looked at the meat. I've got the game bags all laid out over here. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to break down these 6 bags and we're going to separate muscle groups and we're going to cut what we want in steaks. And we're going to really concentrate a lot today on hamburger meat and 2 recipes of brats. We're going to make regular hamburger meat with a very high fat content because I've been on the carnivore diet for about a year off and on. I haven't been as disciplined as I should some of the times. So I've been upping the fat content of my hamburger. So we're going to go 20% fat. And then I'm going to make 2 styles of bratwurst. That's my family favorites. And then we're going to cut all the steaks into finer pieces of meat. And then we're going to vacuum seal that in the meat vacuum sealer. So let's get started. So you can see here, I've got a Graxaw game bag. I mentioned this earlier. I love these game bags. They're just, I can't say enough about these game bags. There's nothing about these game bags that I don't like. They're super ultra light. They are. So see, now this meat is a little bit damp and that's okay. So here is obviously, this is one of the back straps from the elk. So I'm going to keep that right here for now because I'm going to work on those later. This is some neck meat. So the way I like to bag my meat is I like to take the whole back strap out and then I like to couple that with the neck meat. That's not always possible because of weighing out the panniers for the llamas. We had to go back and kind of move some meat around. We even had to cut it up a little bit more to get the weights equal for the pack out. The way I like to do it to get started, backstrap, neck meat in a bag, backstrap, neck meat in a bag, hind quarter in a bag, hind quarter in a bag, front quarter and any supplement meat, front quarter and any supplement meat. So, and then I usually carry a Ziploc bag, a gallon Ziploc bag in my kill kit. And that's what I put the tenderloins in. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to work first on this piece of meat. This is told you earlier, we had to separate. So I kind of look over, get any of the debris, hair that I can off. So it's not always possible to keep everything off your meat. So one of the tricks I do is I take a towel, I just put it in my pocket like this. Okay, I kind of just spread it out. Guys, there's nothing special to this. This is the way I do it. So this I can do like this. I can start picking hair and I can rub that hair off on that. Comes right off on the towel. It makes it quick to get it off. So this meat is really cold. This meat feels exceptionally well. Any of these pieces that are just random, I chunk up. One of the things I want to mention is when I'm processing meat, I like to use a boning knife or a fillet knife, longer, thinner blade, not my usual hunting knife style. So I've got a cheapy Cabela's brand here, and then I've got an ultra nice Bearded Butchers. I want to put a shout out to those guys. I love these guys. I was lucky enough to go on a hunt with them a few years ago. You can check out the film from that hunt on the Bearded Butchers YouTube channel, but Cody Rich and I went on a hunt with them. And when this Montana knife came out as a partnership deal with Bearded Butchers, they sent me one as a gift, and I really appreciate it, and I use it all the time. So when I chunk my meat up, I'll do it in 2 to 3 inch type cubes, and I'll keep it in a separate tub as I go. There's no method to this, guys. I cut off some of the fat. So what I'm starting to do now with all of my trimmings, I used to be like really concerned of the meat that I was wasting on a section of meat that I let hang for a little bit, maybe a couple days, and it got a little bit crusty. The crust is really good for the meat, but it's just hard for me to waste that meat. So I was always throwing all this meat away, right? Well, that was until I got this. Once I got this harvest right, we take all of the meat trimmings that we get and we freeze dry them for dog food and dog treats. I don't know if you've bought any dog food lately, but it's incredibly expensive. Now, in this case, I didn't pack the bones out. I wish I could have, so we could have done bone broth, but we had 3 elk down. We had 10, 12 miles to go. We had 4,000 feet of vertical. We had to make some decisions and the bones had to go. So all these fat pieces, all this stuff is going to get freeze dried for dog treats. So I'm a little bit liberal with it. I don't skimp on trimming. when I'm doing it. That's just a personal preference, whatever you want to do on that. So I'll trim off all the meat that I feel like is appropriate. Chunks this size, guys, that Meat Your Maker grinder is fantastic. So when you're working on a piece of meat like this, for me, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I am not an expert in anatomy. Well, I was pre-med in college. You would think I would know a few things about anatomy, but that was so many years ago that I've forgotten all that. And it's really, don't be intimidated by it. A lot of people are intimidated to do their own meat. So you just find the separations. So in this piece of meat, like right here, and I apologize, I don't have multiple camera angles. You just kind of follow the seams, right? And you just separate where the seams are. And so this piece right here, we're going to separate. And then we're going to take it like this and kind of inspect it a little. I'm going to trim this off just a little bit more here, a little bit black, a little bit more than I want to put in my hamburger. And now, once I feel like this piece of meat is in good shape, then I start chunking it up into 3-inch. There's even chunks this big or even bigger. Like I said, that meat dual grinder handles it easily. So that's all I do is chunk it up into thirds or 3-inch pieces or so. And that's it. And then I just keep putting the hamburger meat. This is a combination of hamburger meat and brats. It's going to get the same style of meat. Okay, back on the meat. Again, we're just kind of following the separations of the muscles, the various muscle groups. So there's some of this bloody, bubbly terminology, right? Skin. Sometimes I leave it. Sometimes I don't. Guys, I have learned over the years that once you grind this into hamburger meat and you mix it with a little bit of fat, there's really no need, in my opinion, to go crazy on what you throw away. I used to just get crazy about the silver skin. I'd flay out the things, get all the silver skin off. I really can't tell the difference in my hamburger when I do it and when I don't. So I've just evolved and changed over the past 36 years of doing this. And then I just kind of, like I said, just chunk it up. And again, there's no real science to this, guys. I'm just going to chunk up this by muscle group and kind of flay up. You can kind of see the natural separations, and you kind of just let your knife go through. And if you're doing majority hamburger meat anyway, there's really, and like I said, there's a couple hairs there. Get the hairs off. This must have been the part that Jeff Helm worked on. It's got all the meat on, all the hair on it. Okay, and like I said, I'm a little bit more generous than I used to be because of the dog. The dog is a part of our family. I mean, I think my wife would like to see me go before the dog goes, so we can't skimp on the dog cuts. So here's a good view. You might be able to see this. You can see this muscle line here, this connective tissue here. So we're just going to open that up a little bit. And then as you can see, that meat just kind of starts apart, and you just kind of follow it along. You can follow that silver skin line. And then when people say silver skin, what do they mean by that? Well, the way I talk about silver skin is this. So this is the silver skin that you're looking at. This is what I used to fillet off, but I don't fillet that off anymore. And then here's another shot of some more silver skin here. I grind it. I don't cut it off. But again, everybody each their own. So whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you like, and we go from there. Taking just a tiny bit of that fat off. So for me, that piece of meat right there is ready to go as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm just going to cut it. No method to it. Just get it into chunks, get it in my tub. Okay, so now that we've chunked up a little bit of that packaged meat there, we've got these chunks, these 3-inch chunks. These are ready to go into hamburger brats, etc. So now I'm going to do this back strap, how I handle the back straps. Now I'm going to get a little more picky about this because we're going to cut these into steaks, and these are some of the favorite steaks, obviously. So we're going to take a little more care in cleaning it up and getting the silver skin off, getting the fat off, and all the undesirables. Now I want to go back to the dog food pile. All of the silver skin, all of the fat, all of it gets freeze dried, and the dogs go crazy over that stuff. So if you've been thinking about a freeze dryer and you really can't justify it for maybe you hunt 14 days a year, maybe you hunt 20 days a year, maybe you did the math and the per meal just doesn't add up. When you start factoring in making some of your own dog food, making your own, like we're up there right now getting ready to process a bunch of peaches. There's just so many uses for this. You won't regret getting Harvest Right. I can almost guarantee it. Okay. So we've got this huge back strap here, and I'm going to start on the back side, meaning the cut side. I'm going to leave the silver skin side, the top of the back, the outside of the back strap for last. I'll explain that a little bit better. So when I start, I'm going to keep it whole for now. If it gets a little bit unruly, I might cut it, but there's just some about handling this big piece of meat, right? I like to keep it whole. Maybe it's an ego thing. Okay, so one of the things that I keep handy while I'm doing this is, this is just a cheapy little knife sharpener, but it's got the fine ceramic triangle, right? And I can run this knife a few times on it as I'm going. And people are probably going, oh my God, Mark, that sharpener is not worthy of that Montana knife. And it probably isn't. But, it's a necessity thing. I mean, a workshop or worksmith or whatever the work tool, whatever those are, they're probably better. Probably a stone's better. I know I'll probably get a lot of comments about this crappy little cheap ceramic thing, but it works for me. So I'm going to just slowly get some of this dried sections. Even the dried meat is going in the dog pile as well. Again, I'm not as careful as I used to be because I know it's going to be used and not be going in the trash. I'm just going to slowly work it. And again, I'm not trying to get every little piece off. I do want to say, since these are going into steaks, I don't like, those chewy silver skin pieces in my meat. So I'm going to work a little bit harder than I would on the others. And again, I'm just filleting. I know you can't see some of this. I'll show you when I get it up. So I'm just filleting off this silver skin and just like that. So see, there's some meat on that. I could sit here and fillet off a little bit more of this meat for my grind, but I'm not doing it. Okay, so once I get that done, I'm going to finish this up in just a second, but I want to show you this. So once you get to this end of the backstrap, it's actually got some separation to it. I don't know what the name is. I don't know what it's called, but there's actually 2 pieces of meat here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of get that up, get it off. And again, this right here is perfectly fine for hamburger meat. A lot of people would spend a lot of time cutting up, not me. It's fantastic. So you can start to see right here, is this separation on this backstrap is right here. So I'm going to cut that off. And again, you could make some small little cube steaks out of this if you wanted to. But we, as a family, we go through a literal ton of hamburger meat. So you can see this is that piece of meat that's separated from the backstrap now. Now we have nothing but a whole backstrap. It's ready to be fine-tuned here in just a minute. So we're going to lay that there. And I've got some Jell-O skin here. So here's a case. Here's a case where I've got some of this Jell-O-y, whatever this is. I don't like the looks of that. So I'm going to fillet off this silver skin. I mentioned earlier, I don't typically do it until I see something like this. So the way I do it, guys, I know this sounds pretty elementary, but there's probably some of you watching that have not done this before, and maybe this will be helpful. So I'm going to put the silver skin down on the cutting board, and I'm just going to cut down. And then I'm going to just, like you're filleting a fish, I'm just going to slide that knife along that silver skin. And now it's gone. We got a tiny bit left. I'm not going to worry about that. That's perfectly fine for me. So I'm going to cut that hamburger pile. And again, we did a pretty good job on these elk. I'm not finding a lot of hair. If you cut through the silver skin like as easy as I did with that knife just then that tells me that, that's going to grind up and that's going to be just fine. If you're battling through it, then you might want to get rid of that. So this end has got a little bit of a dry. This is exposed in the bag. It's got a little bit of a dry rind on it. I'm going to trim that off just a little bit. Not much. Just get the majority off. Okay, got a hair there. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to kind of separate that. Yeah, this looks good. This piece of meat is just fine. I'm going to cut that up. So now we're on this back strap. So it needs a little more work on this end. I'm going to just trim that a little bit more. Get a little bit of that black off. I'm going to flip this around. If my bearded butcher brothers, Seth and Scott, ever see this video, they're going to be horrified. They're going to be absolutely horrified. They're going to be living. My God, you act like it's the first time you've ever done this. I'm a creature of necessity. Just do the things. Okay, so here's some of that jelly silver skin. I'm going to slide my knife. But do you see how my knife goes through that silver skin so easy? That tells me that's going to be just fine if I was doing grind. But remember, I'm making steaks out of this, so I am going to clean it up a little more. If I was grinding that would go right in the bin. Okay, we're getting close on this side. So there's a case where I kind of got a little bit of meat. I got a little bit more meat than I wanted to with that silver skin, so I'm just going to lay it down on my cutting board. I'm just going to fillet that off, and then that's going in the pile. Same again, I got a little bit more than I wanted. This bearded butcher knife is so freaking sharp that it cuts to that silver skin. So this is about as clean as I'm going to make my steak side. So you can see, there's a few little fat spots, but nothing that's going to be a problem. So now we're going to work on this backside. So the backside there's a couple things I like to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim it up, meaning cut off the obvious, bigger, fattier, easy, low-hanging fruit. We're going to take the low-hanging fruit off of this first. We're not going to get into silver skin yet too much. We're just going to take this particulate that's on top of the silver skin, the fat, this tallow. This bowl was so fat. We cooked up the tenderloins in the tallow from the bull. And if you've ever cooked tenderloins in elk tallow, it sticks to the roof of your mouth. It doesn't affect the taste that much. The taste is incredible. It just coats your mouth with this phlegm. Okay, so at this point, you can try to do this thing whole. I'd love to do it whole because I kind of like handling it like this. I like feeling that big piece of meat. In reality, it's a little bit easier if you half it. So I'm just going to half this back strap, and I'm going to go somewhere in the middle, okay, about there, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to slide my cutting board over to the edge of my table where I can drop the handle of my knife below the cutting board. Then I'm going to start working that silver skin like I'm skinning a fish, and I'll take a look every now and then, make sure I'm not getting, and then there you go. That's a pretty darn good looking piece of meat right there. So we take the silver skin off. We've got almost all the fat trimmed off. That is looking fantastic. So I'm going to just put that right there for now. And then I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide my thing out. It's a real help, guys, when you slide this out to the edge of the table where you can drop that knife handle below the edge of the table. I know some of you guys are better at this than me, and that won't be a problem. So, but if you're new to this, now I can already tell when I made that cut, I got a little bit of meat. I could feel the knife rising. So I'm going to flip this over, and there's my silver skin. Okay. It actually turned out better than I thought. I'm going to lay that silver skin down, and I'm going to take just a little bit more meat off of this. This is really prime meat, and it's going into the grind. The dogs aren't going to get this. Sorry, dogs. So I'm going to take that, and then you're going to end up with this. So this is the piece of meat that we had on the second half of that. It's a couple little pieces I'm going to trim up. So when we look at the back here, we can see when we filleted it, we've got most of the silver skin, but there's still some there. So now you can come back on the face up side. This is where you want to be careful not to go too deep because you can get deep quick doing that. I got a little bit deep there. You see, I got a little bit of meat on that silver skin. So I'm just going to lay it down on my table here, back it up to the edge, and I'm going to fillet it off. And there you go. It's that simple, guys. And then I'm going to just finish cleaning this one up just a little bit more. So we've got some really nice cuts here from the one tenderloin, okay? So now we're going to make our steaks. So the way I like to do it, you can butterfly these, you can do whatever, but we just kind of just do it. I do them about 3/4 of an inch thick, about just like that. That is a very nice, and then I have my steak tub going. So I've got a steak tub and I've got a grind tub. I do not separate and label backstrap from other things. For us and our family, elk steak is elk steak. We sometimes I'll label it backstrap if I've got time, but I got another hunt to get to. So I'm just going to slice this up into very nice little steaks with however thick you want them. And then there you go. They're magnificent. Those are, I'm going to have one of those for lunch. That looks so good. So, man, it doesn't get any better than that. So I'm going to finish up this backstrap and we're going to move on. Okay, so now we have wrapped up a backstrap. We have processed some random neck meat and maybe a little bit of front shoulder piece there. So I've just dumped out a new bag, and this bag has a few pieces of hindquarter that we had to break up in the field to get the panniers weighed right. It's fantastic. There's a lot of nice cuts in this. So I've been working on it a little to clean it up, to get it ready. Again, I'm going to work on it a little more than I will the front shoulder or neck meat, things like that. Everything's going into grind. I don't spend a lot of time on. But anything I'm going to make steaks out of, I do spend some time on. So we're going to cut some of this silver skin. We're going to clean up the silver skin pretty good. A little bit of the black meat. You know, the black meat is nothing wrong with it. It's just from being in the bags, being a little bit damp. It's been 3 days since I killed the bull. That's another thing I want to. A lot of guys talk about hanging their meat and aging it. I know guys that age it a month, more than that. I don't like it. You lose so much meat. The outside gets so dry, you're cutting off a half inch. I don't like it, especially when you have to bone out a quarter like this, where you've got a lot of surface area. The more surface area you're going to get, the more waste you're going to have. I do not like aged meat. I like aged beef, but I do not like aged wild game. So I get some hate for that every now and then, but I don't age it. I don't like it. I'm not going to do it. I can't recommend it. Again, to each their own, but I try to get my elk into the freezer or into its final state as quick as possible. The one thing I do want to say is when we're working on Jeff's meat or when we're working on Jeff's bull, I said, dude, just chunk it up, put it in gallon Ziploc bags and freeze it. And then when you get time, you thaw it, grind it, add the fat, grind it, make whatever, sausage, sticks, hamburger, whatever. But there's a lot of guys that are real resistant or don't think it's acceptable or don't think it's good to refreeze meat. I've been doing it for 30 years. I rarely process the meat without refreezing it for grind. Now, steaks, I don't do that, obviously, for steaks. I do not freeze giant chunks of meat and then thaw it out or try to thaw out big pieces of meat. This meat, once you freeze it and you thaw it for a hamburger, when it's partially frozen, is the best time to grind it. The fat and a partially frozen meat is the best hamburger grind you're going to get. Your grinder's going to work better. You're going to have less jams and clog ups. I do it all the time. I don't think I'm going to do it today because I have my fat ready to go. I have my meat here ready to go. I've got a couple of days or a day at least before I leave for my next hunt. So I've got time. But if I didn't have time, I wouldn't even think about refreezing this meat. So thawing it later when I can do a bigger batch. So anyway, that's my rant about that. I have no problem with freezing grind, thawing it and grinding it. I don't do that with steaks or any those types of cuts. And that's the way I do it. So back to this hind quarter. And then again, I'm just doing what I showed you earlier. All I'm doing is just following any line of separation, okay? There's no real method for me. I just kind of go with the flow. It's just not that difficult to do. There's all kinds of technical terms you can use. Like I said, if you want to get into all that, watch the Bearded Butchers. Those boys are master geniuses when it comes to meat. I'm just a Missouri boy that's been processing elk and deer for 40 years of my life. I've only taken meat to a processor one time, and it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. The meat was terrible. It was, I don't even know. They said they lost my deer. They called me a month later, said, oh, they found my deer. I go there, they got like 25 pounds in a milk crate. I'll never forget it. It was like one of those, open hole milk crate. That was the entire deer. And so I'm like, never again. And so I started doing my own at that point, and I've had all kinds of grinders. The Cabela's grinders are fine. LEM makes some great products. I've been on the meat train, Meat Incorporated, for a while. I love their stuff. That double grinder, I thought that double grinder, there's no way that thing was going to work. But you're going to see later when I show you that, it's actually pretty freaking fantastic. So now we're getting into this bigger piece of meat. These fillet knives, or these boning knives, they make quick work of this, the longer, more flexible blade. But you can see here, you've got a seam that runs right up here. So we're going to just kind of separate that seam, and there'll be a silver skin band in there. Again, you can almost, this elk is so tender, we can almost separate with our fingers. Ooh, this meat is cold. We took such good care of this. This is going to be fantastic. So we just kind of follow that. There we go. So we got two pieces here for now. So while I'm cutting on this, let me tell you a little bit about meat care in the field. So once we killed these bulls, we got right on it. We were lucky. All of our bulls went less than 50 yards, all three of them, which was a blessing, especially my bull. Because after I shot my bull, we had the craziest light thunderstorm. We had to get underneath our PEAX tarp, and we had to wait about 30, 45 minutes before we could even look for my bull. It was pouring rain, and I knew we were going to be in real trouble if that bull went anywhere because of the rain washing the blood. And luckily for us, my bull went 23 yards. Fantastic. I'm feeling pretty good about that piece of meat right there. Well, maybe not. I'm kind of picky about my steaks. Now, this hamburger, but I like that right there. That's pretty good. Okay. Again, when you start to fillet that silver skin and your knife cuts right through that silver skin, like real easy, hamburger pile. If you get resistance and it's just like, it's kind of like tough and it's not cutting through very easy, dog pile. That's pretty good. So this is a pretty nice looking piece of meat right here. A lot of nice steaks right here. There is a little bit of a silver skin line here. Okay. I don't want that to mess up the integrity of my steak because I want some nice, pretty nice sized steaks. I'm going to leave it. Sometimes I do that. You don't have to, that'll cook up fine. You can cut around it when you're eating it. It's not a big deal. What I do is on these muscle groups that taper to the end to kind of a point, I'll kind of start off by taking the tip off because the tip of those muscle groups have a lot of connective tissue in them. So I take the tip off and it goes in the hamburger pile. Now we're ready to cut this into steaks. So you can see here, this steak piece has a silver skin tendon lining running right through kind of the middle of it. It's perfectly fine. So again, I'm just going to cut these pretty thick. Nice steaks. These are going to be nice. Okay, there we go. So we've got very nice looking elk steaks there. So to kind of get this started up for steaks, I'm kind of visualizing where I can get my best angle. Again, you want to cut cross grain here. You don't want to cut with the grain. So I'm trying to figure out what the best, I'm not going to cut the tip off of this because I've already trimmed that up pretty good. Now we've got a straight edge to start cutting those steaks. So I'm going to do about an inch. Oh, this meat is just cutting through like butter. It's going to be fantastic. Okay, so that's how we break down like a muscle group on the hindquarter. Okay, so we've been talking about handling silver skin. We've been talking about what's appropriate for a hamburger and sausage, kind of a little bit how we take a little more care cleaning up for the steaks and cube meat and shish kebab meat, all those types of meats. So I've got a piece of hindquarter here that we've separated in the field. And I wanted to talk about one other thing. So this fat, the elk tallow, this fat, this bull, we trimmed off just pounds of this stuff before we put it in the game bags. But now that we're back home and we're processing this meat, there's a temptation for a lot of guys to cut this fat off and use it as tallow, like for a percentage of hamburger meat or leave it on the steaks or whatever. In my opinion, the elk tallow is what gives elk the wild meat taste that a lot of people find undesirable. So if you're used to eating wild game and you love wild game and you like a little bit of that gaminess, which I kind of do, it's not as big a deal, but I definitely trim off all of the elk tallow. You know, I mentioned earlier that a lot of the silver skin will make it into my grind. Not a lot, but you know, the insignificant pieces. That doesn't seem to affect the meat at all. But this tallow, this outside fat layer, this rind of fat, this kind of fat like this fat here that's like right in this area. This is what to me gives elk a real gamey taste, or more gamey taste, I guess I should say. Elk generally is not that gamey, not as gamey as mule deer, but I trim it all off. So I take a lot of care in cutting off all of this tallow. So again, you know, we just do it like we do everything else. We just kind of trim it and then it goes into the dog pile, ready for the freeze dryer. To wrap up, I do take a lot of care in trimming off the fat to keep the gaminess from a lot of my meat. So I'm going to wrap up this portion of my processing with these two pieces of hindquarter. This hindquarter piece right here is going to be, there's going to be a lot of steaks in this section, but you can see it's going to need a little cleaning, a little touch up. This is also going to be a very nice piece of meat for some steaks. Now on this section of meat, this silver skin piece here is incredibly tough, incredibly thick, very hard to cut with a knife. So we are definitely going to take this off and it's not going to make it into our hamburger pile. Okay, so I've wrapped up that elk now, at least the initial phase one. Phase one is what I call where I get it just prepped to go into the processing mode. So I've got my sausage or bratwurst tubs. I've got my hamburger tubs ready to go. Everything's cubed up about 3 inches or so. Then I've got a tub over here of steaks that will be bagged in the meat bags and vacuum sealed in my vacuum sealer. And then I'll start putting together the recipes and mixing the ingredients for the brats. And right now I'm thawing the fat out from beef tallow for the hamburger meat grind. So in an upcoming episode, I'm going to run through all of the brat making, the hamburger grinding, the equipment I use, the recipes I use, all of that stuff. We'll cover that in another episode. So to wrap up, I wanted to come home from this hunt and get this elk done, processed, and in the freezer so that I'll be ready to go on my next hunt, which is coming up in a couple of days. And then I'll have everything cleared out of the way. So if I'm lucky enough to harvest another elk, I'll be able to bring it into my room here and get it done. Overall, doing your DIY meat is very, very simple. And like I said, if you want to get really into the types of cuts, the way to cut, then I really suggest you spend some time on the Bearded Butchers YouTube channel. They've got some fantastic resources. And I think that wraps it up for this Thrive episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Thrive Live from the field. This is the PEAX Thrive Vodcast, raw, real, built for Western hunters.